Chapter 37. Bridge, Sword of Justice, Debris Cloud of Elamine. When the three other thugs had made it to the flight deck and started trying to patch the hole in the door where the Granger's heel was lodged, it was a simple enough matter to remotely lock and seal the doors and cut off access to the emergency hatch behind the bulkhead. They were trapped for a long time. She supposed she could kill them, but that would have probably freaked her captive out and make him try something desperate, knowing he was probably next, and she still needed him. She turned to him.
See? They're safe too. Trapped, but safe. Your name is Gephardt?
He nodded once.
Steve. Okay, Steve, this is what's going to happen now. You're going to summon the doctor here. What was his name? Avasar?
Yeah.
Get him up here. Tell him Taylor is alive after all, but needs immediate medical attention, and that you and your companions here,
she motioned to the other two dead bodies,
can't move him without risking his life. Got it?
Okay. Yeah. He tapped the PA again.
Hey, Doc. Taylor's alive. I repeat, Taylor is alive, but he's in bad shape. I don't think we should move him or he'll bleed out. Get your ass up here ASAP.
Avasar answered, I'm on my way. Keep pressure on those wounds for God's sake. She pointed the gun straight at his forehead.
Stay. If you move an inch, you're dead, understand?
He flinched when the gun pointed towards him, but nodded vigorously. Liu positioned herself next to the entrance to the bridge, out of sight of anyone coming in. Moments later, the door opened, and the doctor ran through. He stopped suddenly when he saw the bodies.
Wait a minute, he began. That's far enough, Dr. Avasar. I'm glad you could join us, said Liu.
He turned around slowly and put his hands in the air. Oh. It took over an hour, but she managed to get all 5 of them locked in her freighter, donned with vacuum suits, and the ship pushed back out into space, free and clear of the frigate. She tapped on her comlink to the freighter.
Sorry about the Q drive, boys, but you should have enough fuel to make it to Sangre de Cristo with conventional engines in about, 5 days. Don't eat the rations all at once.
She tapped it off. Now, the reason she'd come. Finally. Dr. Avasar had given her his charts and all the notes of everything that had been done for him, and to him, as some of the files had ominous names like viral assays, biosignature metawave, impedance matching charts, and some that were titleless.
My God, Danny, what have they done to you?
The door to sick bay slid open, and there he was, asleep, just like in the picture Proctor had shown her, with tubes coming out of him, horrible wounds and burns covering his body. And yet, somehow, the scarring seemed far less serious in person. Or perhaps they'd healed miraculously fast? She stood by the bed, unsure of what to do. She fought the powerful urge to bend over and kiss his forehead. Given the file name Viral Assays, she had no idea if he'd contracted something and was contagious.
Danny,
she said very softly. Nothing changed. He didn't move. The machines hummed and beeped occasionally, breaking the stone silence. She opened his charts on the datapad Avasar had given her and flipped to the last few pages. With a quick scan, she saw that he had indeed been awake recently and was showing marked improvement, so she tried again.
Danny,
she said again, with a little more force. She risked contact, a hand. Chapter 38. Matriarch's Command Center, Skiora Generation Ship Benevolence, near planet Shao 587. Ballsy's fists balled up. Civic saw his face flush red. Are you sure? You're telling me there is an artificial singularity device on board my own ship? Krull inclined her head once.
I am sure as the sky is black.
His father swung around, pointed at Civic and Qwerty, then to their marine escort, and said, We're leaving, now. As he walked out the door to the command center, he called back to Krull. I'm sorry for the intrusion, Matriarch. I have some things to take care of on my ship.
Friend of the Mother Killer, wait, said Krull.
Ballsy paused and turned around. What is it?
I will take you up on your offer.
What?
Your offer. The unthinkable thought exists for me and my people, not for you. If you entering the forbidden room and determining that there is no danger is what it takes to end this senseless war among my people, then that is what I must do."
Ballsy shook his head. "It's going to have to wait. I've got to go take out the trash on my own ship. This device that the Admiral brought aboard the Independence is illegal, and no one is above the law. Not Oppenheimer, not the President. They're illegal for a reason. 30 years ago they wreaked havoc on my people and yours. Their use is what enabled the swarm to come through the Penumbrian black hole 75 years early. They were like a big, flashing signal to the swarm that said, 'Here we are, come get us.' They devastated worlds with them. They destroyed the Florida Peninsula, dozens of cities across the UE. No, I will not tolerate their use, even by my superiors. Now, if you'll excuse me—"
"Tyler Valls, please wait." It was the first time that he'd ever heard Krull call any human by their given name, rather than by a title given by the Skura. Ballsy's eyebrows elevated as he recognized the same thing.
"Matriarch?"
Please help me end my people's war, before it's too late. If you do, we can help you in your war against the swarm."
"Madam, if you're not already helping us in the war against the swarm just because it's the right thing to do, then I have nothing else to say to you."
"Please, Tyler Valls." He was still paused by the door, standing in the hallway just outside the command center. He cracked the knuckles of his fingers with his thumb as he considered, something Civic recognized as something he only did when he was very nervous and very unsure of himself, which rarely happened. "Not now. I need to clean my own house first," he considered. "Come with me to Britannia. I need to go there now, and I can't wait. If this order truly came from the new president, he needs to be exposed sooner rather than later before he can do more damage. And the only place I can do that is at Britannia. That's where the president currently is, and so where I have to go. Accompany me there, and I promise I'll make time to help you solve your mystery as soon as I get to the bottom of my own mystery." Her answer came quickly. "Agreed." Civic followed his father out of the command center and down the hall, back toward the pod that would whisk them away back to the flight deck. "What does it mean that there's one of those things on our ship?" "It means we've got lawless traitors in our midst. That was a dangerous swarm weapon back in the day. They used it to destroy worlds and kill billions, and it messed with—" Chapter 39. Sickbay, Sword of Justice. Debris Cloud of Elamine. "Danny?" She bolted from the office and back into sickbay. "Danny?" She'd thought the Valerisi were extinct. Proctor had exterminated them decades ago. She was ordered to commit genocide. According to her personality file at IDF Intel HQ, it was what caused the irreparable rift between Oppenheimer and Proctor. There should be no Valerisi organic fluid left. They were all dead. Of course, the swarm was supposed to be destroyed too, and yet they came back, bigger and badder than ever. Her head snapped in the direction of a thud out in the hallway. Slowly, deliberately, she crept towards the door, her gun drawn and gripped by one hand, cradled by another, pointing downward, but ready to be swung around the doorframe. She held cover by the door for another few seconds, waiting for more noises, but nothing came. So she swung around the doorframe and aimed down the hall. It was empty. A crash in the next room. Whatever it was doing, he sure didn't care if anyone heard him. She crept down the hallway and approached the door to the room she was hearing scuffles and clanks and clatters from. Good Lord, what the hell was he doing in there? It sounded like he had every tool out he could find and was assembling a bomb, or he was searching through cabinets full of metal and glass. She glanced at the sign over the door, and her heart skipped a beat. Her jaw dropped a hair. "You've got to be kidding." Galley. Tentatively, she peered around the corner. Danny, standing at the counter, his bare ass hanging out the back of the hospital gown, with almost the entire contents of the fridge assembled in front of him, gorging himself on everything he could shove into his mouth all at once. Hungry? He spun around, clutching onto a bowl of ice cream with a death grip, a look in his eye that said, "If you mess with my dessert, I will end you." "Fiona?" He dropped the bowl onto the counter with a clatter and started moving towards her. "Fiona! Oh my God, it's you! And—" His eyes took her in. The ruined skin on her face, the burns, the effects of the intense radiation. "You look like shit. Hold it!" She raised the gun a hair, not pointing at him, but not pointing at the floor either. "You're Danny?" "Of course I am. Who the hell do I look like?" "What's your last name?" He looked confused, and a note of fear crept into his eyes. She tensed, counting the seconds he wasn't answering, and wondering if he were controlled by the swarm, how long it would be before he started either guessing or changed the subject. "Proctor! Danny Proctor! Fiona, what's going on? Where did we meet?" "You've got to be kidding me," he started. She raised the gun slightly higher, still not pointed at him, but pointed at the wall. "TJ's place, in the back, you know." He looked slightly embarrassed. "Riding the horsey." She wanted to breathe a sigh of relief. He was right. The first time she saw him, he was riding a ridiculous mechanical toy horse meant for small children in the back of a popular restaurant on San Martin. But the swarm could have figured that out by infiltrating their network of friends. Okay, last thing." She lowered the gun a hair. "What does my tattoo say, the one on my ass?" He looked confused. "You don't have a tattoo on your ass. Or is there something you're not telling me?" She holstered the gun. "Danny, what the hell is going on?" He forced a weak smile. "I asked you first." "Are you Swarm or not? I saw your file. It said they injected you with Swarm, and after they did, you healed. Fast." She left out the part about how he may have actually been dead for a while, in case he didn't know. "They did. I overheard it all when they thought I was asleep. Apparently they were setting a trap for my aunt, and the president paid Huntsman for his services. But Huntsman didn't want money. The payment, apparently, was the UE government's secret sample of swarm matter that they'd kept. The only one. And here's the weird thing. After they injected me, I woke up, and after a monstrous headache, I could remember everything." "What do you mean?" "The fall from orbit, going through the atmosphere." Chapter 40. Inside Titan, near Britannia. "I beg your pardon?" Proctor thought she'd misheard. Granger's tone was rising, as if he was tired. Very, very tired. "I need this existence to end, Shelby. I've been alive and conscious and thinking for far, far, far too long. You have no idea what a hell it is, how much I've dreamed of death over the years, of just having a frickin' break, you know?" The doors to engineering were not opening for them as the others had. She supposed it was under Tim's direct control. "Tim, I can't." "Promise me, Shelby. Promise me you will." "I'm not going to kill you, Tim. Not after everything that's happened. I'm not losing you again." She was fighting back tears. The Marines were staring at her. She didn't care. She balled her fists and wanted to punch something. The doors, the Marines. No, that was a bad idea. "Not happening." "You've got to, Shelby. It's all part of the plan. If you don't, the swarm will win. Earth will be destroyed and humanity overwhelmed. Believe me, I've thought about this for billions of years. I've run the simulations. I've made the calculations. Everything points to one thing. To win. To finally, totally win and completely destroy the swarm, you must kill me. I must die. There's no way around it." "But why?" "Many reasons. I've told you one selfish reason already. I want to. I'm tired of being aware. I want to rest. But another reason is entirely practical. The swarm is part of me. They're in me, inseparably. They don't control me, and they don't know my thoughts or my plans, but they're always with me, and as long as I live, you'll never be free of them." She shut her eyes tight, her balled fist pressed against her lips. "Okay, fine. I promise. But not now." He paused for a few moments. "No, not right this second, but soon." The doors slid open. "Your way is clear. I think you'll know what to do, and once you do it, I'll no longer be able to speak to you." "Why not?" "Because, Shelby, I told you, I'm different. I'm not Tim anymore. You'll see." She stepped inside engineering. In some ways, very little had changed. Same consoles, same layout. In other ways, it was utterly alien. The colors, the markings on the walls, the smell. And there, in the center of the room, in between the central command console and the coolant controls, was a machine that had been set up. It looked remarkably like a coffin, but she supposed that was just her imagination and the recent... Chapter 41. Bridge, ISS Independence, near Britannia. In a flash, the unnamed planet purported to be the homeworld of the Sciora disappeared on the view screen, instantly replaced by a view of Britannia, with Saturn's moon Titan behind it and to the left from their perspective. It was a lot closer to the planet than when they'd left just a few hours ago. "Huh," said Civic. "I guess Jesus Granger heard me after all. Looks like Titan might be trying to pull Britannia back into orbit." Commander Mumford, the science officer, let out a short breath of amazement from his station near the back of the bridge. "I tell you, I never thought I'd see anything like this. Pure magic." Halsey raised an eyebrow. "Magic, Mr. Mumford? Never thought I'd hear a scientist say something like that. How else can you explain it? I can almost buy the likelihood of a Q-jump engine with a high enough power output to be able to move a moon. But this? Look at these readings. Britannia is feeling the pull of Titan and therefore experiencing an acceleration vector in its direction which, when you add the acceleration vector due to the sun, is resulting in a vector that will eventually, in the next hour or so, pull it back into its usual orbit. Titan, on the other hand, you want to know what acceleration vector due to gravity it is experiencing?" "Surprise me," said Halsey. "Zero. Titan is literally feeling zero gravitational pull from either the sun or Britannia. If that's not magic, I don't know what is. Newton will not be cheated, my friends." Civic chuckled a bit. "Not after what Einstein did to the bastard." Mumford snapped his head in Civic's direction. "You think Einstein did anything to invalidate Newton? Far from it. All he did was refine the model, not toss it out. Newton is just an approximation to Einstein, and Einstein is just an approximation to Nguyen, and Nguyen's Q-space theory, probably just an approximation to something else, which gives me comfort that this, maybe, is not magic." Halsey stood up from the captain's chair. "All right, last I heard, the president was on his way to Britannia for a meeting of the UE Congressional Security Council. Is Interstellar 1 here yet?" "Yes, sir. It hasn't descended to the surface yet. Looks like it just made orbit," said Whitehorse. "Send a request for a teleconference. And, Querty, you get on your horn and try to raise someone in the UE congressional leadership and patch them into the party." Both officers set to work. Civic sidled up to his father and murmured, "You really think they're going to side with you? This is a huge gamble, you know." "It is," replied Halsey. "But it's also the right thing to do. We're a nation of laws, and if our leaders think they're above the laws, then we're doomed." He looked up at Civic. "And if our own house is not in order, how in the world can we ever hope to beat the swarm? You weren't there 30 years ago. We were this close. He held up 2 fingers a centimeter apart, to losing, and all because of politics. Because of sniveling politicians thinking they were above the law, and wheeling and dealing and maneuvering behind the backs of the people and the military and the officers and crew who were sacrificing everything to win. I lost everything in that war, son." "You didn't lose Mom." Halsey tensed and frowned. "I never told you. Never told you about Fishtail." "Oh? Who was that?" "A pilot. Jessica Miller. Was married, had a kid. Her husband died in the first swarm attack at Moonbase, I believe." He was choked up. "I saved her. Twice. And she saved me. I thought I'd lost her, but against all odds I saved her. But the experience changed us. I thought... He shook his head in embarrassment. "This sounds crazy now that I say it out loud, but I thought I was going to marry that girl. I thought I was going to be that kid's dad, but after seeing so much death and loss and nearly dying ourselves, it just got awkward between us and we drifted away from each other." Civic was silent. He knew his father wasn't trying to imply anything other than his own sense of loss, his own horrifying experiences during the Second Swarm War. But the subtext was unavoidable. And so you married Space Champ instead. Consolation prize. Halsey glared at him. How could you say that? That's not true. Not in the slightest. Isn't it, Dad? You left her and me after, 3 years? That's all you could take of having second best? Halsey's face turned purple, and Civic thought for just a moment that a fist might be coming his way. But Captain Vols was nothing if not cool under fire. That's another thing I lost because of the war, son. In the war, I was a hero. I was invincible. I was heralded by parades in my honor, 50-gun salutes when I came to speak at academy graduations, media interviews, celebrities fawning over me. And then, when I got home, I was a... Civic swallowed. A what? Halsey turned back to the screen. A fucking failure, that's what. I could win battles against an overwhelmingly powerful enemy, but at home, I couldn't win a damn thing. I couldn't help her. I was useless. She was broken too, and I didn't know how to help her, to fix her. The war messed her up good just like it did me, and we both paid the price. He glanced at his son for the smallest of moments. And so did you. Another way I failed, by failing you. He turned back to the screen and lowered his voice even further. Don't get sucked in by the siren call, son. The false glamour of war. Don't be a hero. Just be a human who does great things and then who goes home and does normal things. Civic was speechless, but he didn't even have time to think of how he might respond, because almost simultaneously on the screen appeared both President Sepulveda and Senator Valeria Shin, who, if Civic recalled correctly, was President of the Senate. It looked like Shin was on a ship, too, from the looks of the bridge crew in the background behind her. Vols, you better have a remarkably convincing reason why you're here and under these circumstances. Where's Oppenheimer? Said Sepulveda. He's in the next room. I wanted to talk to you first, alone and with a witness from Congress. Thank you for joining us here, Senator Shin. Civic glanced over at QWERTY, who'd made the call to get Shin and wanted to buy the man a beer. The Speaker of the House was from the President's party, but Senator Shin was in the opposition and very well respected. That he'd had the presence of mind to contact the right politician for the job at hand was, well, remarkable for someone who was usually so socially clueless. Shin nodded. What's going on, Captain? Am I to understand that you have the commander of the IDF fleet in custody? As Mr. Sepulveda says, I hope your reasons are very, very good. They are, ma'am. He looked over to Sepulveda. Mr. President, I have evidence. Chapter 42. Inside Titan, near Britannia. What do we do? Proctor said. Case and Davenport both looked at her, probably wondering if she was still talking to the voice in her head or them. I'm not done adjusting Britannia's orbit. You... what? This whole time I've been maneuvering Titan into a position from which I could pull Britannia back into its proper orbit and avoid permanently disrupting its climate. Your friend, Batshit, asked me. Ethan Civic asked you to move Britannia? Yes. Tight beam on low intensity fired just before he left the system on the Independence. I was almost done, but... His voice trailed off. Tim? When his voice returned, he was almost yelling. Run, Shelby! Grab the box and run! Chapter 43. Bridge. Stealth ship The Prophet's Revenge near Britannia. Patriarch Toby Orrin Huntsman knew the time was ripe. The fullness of times was upon them, finally. As soon as the Gentile president's face disappeared from the screen, he turned to look at his assistant manning the comm station on their freighter. The most holy place, he'd named it. A grand title befitting such a lowly, humble ship. Just as holiness ever was, lowly, humble. A babe in a stable. A voice crying in the wilderness wearing burlap and eating locusts. A prophet ushering in the fullness of times in a Missouri swamp. An avenging angel on a decommissioned, leaky merchant freighter. Brother Lindsay, send word to the destroying angel. Chapter 44. Bridge, ISS Resolute, near Britannia. Admiral Christian Danforth Oppenheimer stormed onto the bridge of the Resolute, his flagship and most advanced vessel in the fleet, and he was boiling with rage.
"Is it doing anything? Assemble the fleet. Send a distress call to the San Martin Defense Fleet and tell them to get their asses here yesterday. I want all torpedo tubes loaded and ready to go, and tell the deckhands to transfer the contents of my shuttle's cargo into one of the tubes. I have a feeling it may come in handy against that monstrosity," he said, pointing up at the screen which was showing the swarm ship slowly turn to bring one of its main guns to bear on Titan. A minute of focused pandemonium on the bridge passed as every station transitioned into battle mode. Chapter 45. The Destroying Angel. That is what the prophet had called him. Years ago they would have used the title Friend. When individuals were brought into the Concordat of Seven, they were made to be friends. Times change, terms change. Meaning does not. The voice called out in his head as if it were a voice but a noiseless voice, and yet not a voice, for it came from him. That was what the Concordat was like, the family. They spoke with one voice, one will, one goal. "It is time. Act now," said the Chapter 46. Inside Titan, near Britannia. Proctor ran as fast as she could, thanking fate the whole time that gravity was only at 1/2 G. They retraced their steps from engineering, back up the stairs, down more hallways, past the rooms with strange equipment. Some of those rooms now rang with seemingly uncontrolled energy. Whatever Granger had been doing to keep the place under control was quickly becoming noticeable in its absence. "Ma'am, this way." Case waved his hand and lifted her over a section of ceiling that had fallen. She just now noticed that the walls were shaking uncontrollably. Her comm buzzed. "Admiral, you coming yet? Carson to Admiral Proctor, do you read?"
"I'm here, Commander."
"Finally. Been trying to raise you for 20 minutes. We've got incoming. A few moments ago, all the jamming disappeared, and as soon as they did, my sensors detected a torpedo headed our way. It'll be at the entrance to the shaft in less than 5 minutes. No idea what it's tipped with, but I'm damn sure it ain't cotton candy." She pointed up the long stairway they still had to ascend.
"Run!"
Damn it, how long had it taken them to climb down here? 5 minutes? 10? They ran up the stairs. Her knees ached, everything ached, but she ran faster, cradling the little black box against her chest, knowing that it and it alone contained the secret that would save them all. If she could only live long enough that it would even matter. The stairs seemed endless. They passed the transition from smooth metal to rough asteroid rock. Her legs were screaming out in pain, and her lungs were on the verge of exploding, but grabbing the banister with one hand and clutching onto the box with the other, she started taking them 2 at a time.
"Thank God for ceramic knees and 1/2 G gravity wells," she wheezed.
Her side started to ache, then burn with a sharp, acute pain. "Almost there, ma'am. Please, we must hurry." Case had slung the rifle over a shoulder, and without even asking her, grabbed the box out of her hand and offered her his other. She took it, and with strength that nearly pulled her 69-year-old upper arm out of its socket, he gave her a boost that let her take the stairs 3 at a time.
I can't."
She had to stop. The pain was too intense. She was going to pass out. She started seeing white stars at the edges of her vision, and, at first, thought that they had made it, but it was just her sight failing as her brain struggled to get enough oxygen.
"I can't."
"Almost there, Admiral. You're going to make it. Almost there." Even as her vision went nearly white, she felt herself bounding up the stairs somehow, her legs imbued with superhuman strength, which she supposed was just... Chapter 47. Terrace Heights Playground, Whitehaven, Britannia. Sarah Watkins usually didn't get to go to the playground 2 days in a row. Her mother preferred to alternate between the playground and the beach during summer vacation. But with all the confusion from yesterday and the earthquakes, they'd skipped the beach, choosing the short 10-minute walk to the park instead. And that was perfectly fine with Sarah. She and her imaginary friend Sam were both swinging this time, in a contest to see who could go higher. Higher, higher, pump the legs forward, swing the legs back, just like Daddy taught her. It was hot that day,
and the breeze on her face as she swung was nice. She wished the sun would go away. And it did. Covering it was another one of those Granger moons. She thought maybe her mom would start screaming again, so she looked back at the bench she was sitting on. No screaming, just talking nervously into her handset as she eyed the sky, the sudden twilight making it a little difficult to see her face. So Sarah wouldn't scream either. Chapter 48. Where are we? She sat back down, cautiously, and breathed. About 100,000 clicks from Britannia, ma'am. Titan is off our port bow. Case maneuvered the ship until Titan appeared on the view screen, and behind it, looming much larger, was Britannia. Green and blue and beautiful, with clouds and coastlines and wilderness that extended for thousands of miles on both continents. Forests and mountains and tundra and plains and the billions of people bustling about their day, trying to get back to their normal business, a continent and center of human civilization going about the daily mundane tasks of staying civilized. And her brother and his wife, she knew, were down there, somewhere. All of this and more flashed across her mind in the next moment. The moment seemed to slow down. It was an eternal moment, almost a peaceful moment. She supposed it was exactly opposite what Granger experienced in the black hole as he looked out at the universe outside and saw it speed up. But for her, time stopped in that moment, and even during that moment she knew the image would be seared into her memory for the rest of her life. It would give her nightmares, she knew. Everything would change. Titan exploded. The crust expanded outward in a rapidly growing white sphere, followed by titanic streams of magma. It took more than 10 seconds, but eventually the blast front nearest Britannia overtook it, slamming into the surface, rendering everything. Chapter 49. Bridge, ISS Independence, near Britannia. Firing torpedoes, sir. All mag-rail crews are focused on that main weapons spire pointing at Titan, Whitehorse called out. On the view screen, Civic watched as torpedo after torpedo leapt away and raced across space towards the swarm ship, moving implacably towards Titan. Civic noticed his father pace back towards the weapons station to watch the progress from there. The captain bent low to peer at one of the screens and tapped it, perhaps to scroll through the tracking of the damage the sensors were seeing on the enemy ship. "Captain," Civic said, "orders for the flight crew, are we deploying or not?" His father ignored him. Instead, he finished at the weapons station, nodded to himself as if lost in thought, and returned to the center of the bridge. "Dad? Yay or nay, Moonshine is squawking at us, wondering what's up." "No need, son." His father hadn't even turned away from the view screen to tell him. He was transfixed. Captain?" began Whitehorse, studying her screen at the weapons station. "We just launched a torpedo, and it's behaving oddly." "We've launched lots of torpedoes, Lieutenant," he replied, still watching the process of the battle on the screen. "Yes, sir, but this one just veered off its course towards the swarm ship. Something wrong with its avionics, and it's not responding. I can't control it. It's a loose cannon at this point. We should send a message out to the fleet to be on guard in case it heads their way." He gave a short, single nod. "Proceed." Lieutenant Querty signaled out to the rest of the defenders about the rogue torpedo, but halfway through his message it became clear something was terribly wrong. "Sir, it's not just flying randomly, it's heading towards Titan. And not just towards it, but targeted directly on what looks like a giant hole. Like an access port or something that whatever else is in there has tunneled." "The false savior reaps the whirlwind," murmured Ballsy. Civic cocked his head, then glanced back at Whitehorse. She shrugged and mouthed, "What does that mean?" "Dad, what's going on?" "Just watch, son. That swarm ship will never know what hit it." He felt an impending sense of unease, but turned towards the screen and watched. The weapons spire on the swarm ship was clearly charging, and all the fleet's combined strength was having little effect on it. Within a few minutes, it would fire, and Titan was toast. "The torpedo entered Titan, and— oh my God." Whitehorse looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I'm detecting strange quantum fluctuations coming off of it, gravitational distortions and eddies. Sir, I think something is not just wrong with that torpedo. I think it's been altered.
Indeed it has, Lieutenant.
Civic and Whitehorse were speechless, and the rest of the bridge crew was quieting down as they noticed something was up. And in another minute, words failed them completely. Titan's death was breathtaking. It would have been a spectacular show, especially since its main blast front tore through the nearby swarm ship as if it were tissue paper. But Britannia was behind it, and it died, too. It happened so quietly, so matter-of-factly, so quickly, that Civic felt like he was watching a simulation, a movie. It couldn't be true. This couldn't be reality. But it was, and Britannia burned. A plume of white blasted off the entire surface nearest to them and billowed upward, the ocean evaporating and blasting into space.
"And the false savior dies, just like he said," murmured Balsey.
Civic turned and walked towards the Marine standing guard at the door. With a nod and a pointed finger he indicated the man's stun gun, and the Marine unholstered it and passed it over. He turned and approached the center of the bridge. A raised arm. He fired. Balsey shook momentarily, then collapsed onto the deck. It was another surreal event, against the backdrop of the impossible, and so the entire bridge crew watched it happen without saying a word. "Nobody touch him!" yelled Civic. He pointed at the Marine whose gun he took and said, "Get a body bag or something, blankets, whatever. Don't touch his skin. No skin contact." Chapter 50. Bridge, Interstellar 1, near Britannia. He betrayed me. He played me. President Sepulveda felt a rush of something. He didn't recognize it. It was like a foreign substance in his body. Could it be? Could it really be the swarm? Had Huntsman's betrayal gone that far? He closed his eyes, breathed deep, shook his head a few times, and then looked back up at the view screen on the bridge of Interstellar 1. Britannia was still drowning in fire and ballistic moon debris, and his mind was still his own. No, it was impossible. He couldn't be infected. He was no man's bitch. But the feeling was still there. It needed a name. It needed to be categorized and therefore understood, exposed for what it was, and then discounted and ignored. It was fear. Hopeless fear, dread. "Sir, we need to get you out of here, now," said Tom. "Right, the Secret Service's #1 job, the President's survival, even as humanity burned down before their very eyes." "Right. Where to, sir?" "Lieutenant Commander Whitehorse on the Independence is calling a retreat to Calais. Admiral Oppenheimer is ordering the Earth Defense Fleet back to Earth and is accompanying them there on the Resolute. And we're just now detecting a signal from what appears to be Admiral Proctor on board the stealthed Defiance. Audio? Visual? Audio. Encrypted, but we've got decryption software that deciphers just about everything. Let me hear." He leaned forward in his chair. The communications officer on the bridge tapped her console. "Don't think we can do that. Our civilization is in ruins." Proctor was speaking so low it was almost a whisper, but she was interrupted. "So is ours, Mother Killer. This war, though we have, through our very best efforts, tried to avoid it, has touched even us. It has ruined us. Tens of thousands of my sisters are dead, as are millions of their children, and billions of ours. Billions, Krull. An entire world. The center of our civilization after Earth, my brother, his wife, my students. Almost everyone I've ever known, all incinerated. And you have the temerity, the gall to ask me to go find a ship? I'm not a courier. I'm not your messenger girl. My civilization is burning down around me as we speak. Mother Killer, please, I believe it is important. My God, Krull, wake up. Listen to yourself. Fine, okay, tell me, what is so important about that ship that you need it to meet you at Calais? And why the hell can't you go meet it somewhere yourself? Why me? Because, Mother Killer, we are at war. They would never come, not if I ask. They would think it's an ambush. And as for the what, I can't tell you yet, not over an open channel like this. The risks are too great. But suffice it to say it's important, monumentally important, to stop the swarm. Then my answer is no. Go do your own shit, I'll go do mine. If you can't even tell me, then we're done. Proctor out.
Silence. Sepulveda stroked the stubble on his chin. Interesting, he murmured. Sir, we still need a heading. That blast front will overtake us in a few minutes. Open an encrypted channel to the Benevolence, and then I'll tell you our destination after that. Peel frowned but waved to the communications officer, who tapped the console a few times. Okay, Mr. President, you're on. Polrum Kroll, this is President Sepulveda of United Earth. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. I overheard your conversation with Admiral Proctor. Tell me, what's so important about that other ship? Krull's voice came sonorous. Chapter 51. Bridge, Sword of Justice, Debris Cloud of Elamine. Liu and Danny had to leave the asteroid cloud in a hurry. 2 unidentified ships were bearing down on them, sending hails and charging weapons when they didn't answer, and so they did what any sane person would do. They charged the Q-jump engine and got the hell out of Dodge. And now they were already plodding through Q-space, jump after jump towards Britannia, when the metaspace distress calls went out. Oh. She stared at the message in disbelief. Oh. What is it? Danny asked, but she couldn't answer him, couldn't unlock the fear that had seized her throat and sealed it solid. She shook her head, dislodging her biological response to shock and fear through the force of habit. She cleared her throat. Britannia's gone. Gone? Gone how? Liu shook her head. No, it's gone. Destroyed. Danny's face screwed up tight, but he didn't cry, not yet. Liu was glad. She hated it when he cried. Not that it happened much, but when it did, she couldn't bear it. I'm sorry, Danny. I know your parents were there. He stared straight out the front viewport, eyes unblinking. Everyone I ever knew before San Martin. She was numb, too. She never cried, but even if she could, the magnitude of the loss was too great. Crying wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. How do you mourn 8 billion people? Tell me about them. Your parents. She needed to change the subject, and helping Danny grieve seemed as good as any subject. Yeah. Okay. They garden. They go to the beach like 5 times a year. They're great. They were great. And that was enough. At the utterance of the word were, he broke down. She stood up to go put her arms around him. That, at least, she could do. But she only made it about halfway. She doubled over and started retching, vomiting huge heaves of almost nothing onto the floor. Just more stomach lining. The radiation she'd absorbed was starting to show its effects again after that first wave aboard the Defiance. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. However much she wanted to believe the lies she told Proctor, the radiation would kill her, inexorably and surely. Fiona? Oh my God, hey, let me help you. He'd gotten out of his own seat and was kneeling beside her, rubbing her back, his own tears momentarily forgotten. I know, I want to throw up too, but I'll stick with bawling for now. She shook her head through the heaves. When they finally subsided and she collapsed to a sitting position on the side of one bent leg, she made her decision. He had to know. He'd know anyway in a few hours, no matter what she said. Danny, I'm dying. What? I was on board your aunt's ship when an attack happened. I was in the engine room and I absorbed a little more radiation than I probably should have. How much more? A lot more, Danny. He was shaking his head in disbelief. No, I can't. I can't lose my parents, my home, my planet, and you all at once. You'll be okay, Danny. I found you. You're alive. I'm taking you back to your aunt. She ordered me to find you, and hey, let's face it. She looked up, out the viewport like he had earlier. We're all about to die anyway. The swarm
isn't going to stop this time, no matter what Jesus Granger has to say about it."
They sat in silence for a long, long time, Danny occasionally shaking with a few silent sobs, Fiona sometimes leaning on all fours, retching again. "No, I'm not sitting idly by while you die. I'm not doing it." He stood up abruptly and started opening storage containers on the walls of the bridge, peering inside and slamming them before opening another.
"Danny, what are you doing?"
"Saving you. What the hell does it look like I'm doing?" He opened another container, looked inside, and then slammed it.
"By throwing a tantrum?"
He opened another and reached inside. "Got it." He pulled something out. It was in his palm, and she couldn't immediately see what it was. "No tantrum, just a little fluid exchange."
"Now? You want to have sex? Now? What is that, lube?"
He grinned. "I'll take a rain check." Chapter 52. Bridge, ISS Defiance, near Britannia. Proctor slid a finger in the air near her throat, indicating to Lieutenant Davenport to cut the transmission.
"The nerve of that woman, watching our planet get destroyed and then asking help for a game of hide-and-seek."
"But, Mum," said Davenport, "what if she's right?"
"I beg your pardon?"
She swiveled her seat around to face him. Marines weren't supposed to squirm, and he very nearly did.
"She says finding that Domasi's ship could help end the war."
She guffawed.
"That's bullshit. Has she ever bullshitted you, Mum?"
She pounded her armrest.
"God damn it, Lieutenant, my answer is no."
"Mum, what else have we got?" She held up the box.
"We've got this."
"That's a box, from which you heard voices in your head," said Commander Carson.
"Oh, not you too, Commander."
She stood up and paced towards them slowly.
"It wasn't voices, it was Tim fucking Granger, and from what he told me, he is in this box."
She shook it in front of her and then stared at it.
"My God, that does sound crazy."
Carson demurred. "If you weren't going to say it, ma'am, then I probably would have eventually."
"The fact remains," she continued, "as crazy as it sounds, it's what I've got to go on. And you saw what was down there with your own eyes. Clearly some far greater being than any of us, with incomprehensible technology at his or her disposal, created that void in the middle of Titan's mantle and converted the whole damn moon into a giant Q-jumping cannon. Given that, what the hell is so hard to believe about this? If a moon can Q-jump, then this box can contain Tim Granger. And at the moment, that's all I've got."
Davenport shook his head. "Mum, you've also got Krull's request. I don't understand why she would lie to us."
"Lieutenant, I've had aliens lying to me for longer than you've been alive."
She turned to look him in the eyes. Very young eyes. Too young to have seen the injustices and curveballs and outrages that the universe could throw at you.
"Domasi have lied to me. Skiora have lied to me. Swarm did nothing but lie."
Chapter 53. Bridge, ISS Independence, Gas Giant Calais, Britannia System. Wellington Shipyards was a hive of activity. Most of the other ships in the vicinity of Britannia with Q-jump capabilities had had the same idea as Lieutenant Commander Whitehorse. Fleet ships that had survived the aborted battle with the swarm ships were everywhere, waiting for berth assignments. Smaller vessels that had been lucky enough to be far enough away from Britannia when it was hit by Titan's blast front were scattered throughout the vicinity, probably with their Q-drives spun up on standby in case the swarm made a sudden appearance. Everyone was on edge. Whitehorse exhaled a deep breath.
"Okay, we're here."
She stood up.
"I want a full ship status report. Ordnance inventory, repair status, everything. Commander Mumford, you have the bridge. Civic, you're with me."
Civic followed her out the door and down the corridor towards the lift. He fell into step with her, opened his mouth to talk, but found he had nothing to say. The magnitude of the event was still hitting him. His brain was still processing it. He followed her to sickbay. He knew exactly where she'd be headed. The door opened to reveal Captain Valls, still knocked out, strapped and cuffed to an examination bed, with a hard, transparent plastic partition separating him from them.
What's his status, Nurse Cunningham? Physically, he's perfectly fine. Mentally, neural pathways, brain patterns? Also fine. But I've also only had a few minutes here. I'm afraid I won't have any answers for you for a while, if at all. Civic stared at his father, prone and asleep, snoring lightly. Answers. So, you know what happened? You heard? Staff Sergeant Bix told me when he brought the captain in, yes. But you should know, I have exactly 0 experience with swarm matter infection. It's not exactly a course they taught at med school. I thought the swarm matter was all gone, extinct. So did we. And here he is. Of all the things that still had Civic in shock, it was this. His father, who, just hours before, was crammed into a fighter with him manning the rear gun, shooting mini swarm fighters off their tail, who just half an hour ago was giving him a heart-to-heart life lesson, who just today had called him so many names he'd lost count. Did the swarm call people names in jest? How had whatever was controlling his father acted so convincingly? We need to wake him, Nurse. I have questions, urgent questions that need answers, said Whitehorse. Nurse Cunningham nodded and touched something on a console near the wall. Out of the examination bed, a metasyringe extended and pressed against Ballsy's neck. In about a minute, he was awake. Where the hell am I? He looked around himself, tried to get up, but found himself restrained. What is this, Ethan? His father was finally looking at him. Ethan, what's going on? Did I black out during the battle? Was I injured? Civic walked around the plastic enclosure, still staring at the thing inside that had the body of his father. You're really good. I read the stories, the history of the war. I knew swarm-controlled agents were excellent actors, but I had no idea. Ballsy swore. What the hell are you talking about? Get me out of this bed, now! Civic kept pacing. They say the entire Russian High Command at the time was infected, including several people in high UE posts. Even Granger himself had the stuff in him at one point. It was all destroyed, said Ballsy. There was no swarm matter left, and I was there when Proctor destroyed the remaining Valerisi. They're dead, too. There is no possible way I could be infected with swarm matter. Civic stopped pacing and folded his arms. And yet, here you are. Yes, here I am, tied to a bed by a no-good son who's got mush for brains. Let me the hell out. No, Dad. You're staying right there until we can find the cure, if there even is a cure. Granger was cured, so maybe you can be too. Ballsy stopped struggling. Ethan, look, we can talk about the finer details of swarm war history later, but I know for certain that there is no more swarm matter, and you destroyed Britannia, Dad, he blurted out, interrupting him. You destroyed Britannia. You fired a singularity-tipped torpedo down to Titan, and it blew. It was too close to Britannia, trying to stabilize its orbit, so now Britannia is gone, too. You destroyed a Granger moon, and you destroyed... His voice caught in his throat. Our home, and 8 billion people. So no, Dad, I am not letting you out of there until we can explain this. Ballsy's face turned sheet white. His eyes darted to Whitehorse. Jerusha, is it true? She only nodded. Civic had never seen his father cry, but the tears welled and poured down his cheeks. Everyone? Whitehorse nodded again. I don't see how anyone could have survived, even buried in a bunker 100 kilometers deep. Everyone is dead. Ballsy's head collapsed back down onto his pillow. After a moment, he spoke. Kill me. Dad, kill me now. You have absolutely no choice, and as your captain, I'm ordering it. Kill me. Civic returned to Whitehorse's side. No, Dad. You're not in command anymore. Jerusha is. Whitehorse was defiant. And we're not killing you. Not until we make every effort to get that stuff out of you. And if you can't, do you promise you'll kill me? Ballsy's eyes pleaded. The question took Civic aback. No, Dad, if we can't, then we try again. And again, and again, until you're you again, understand? Whitehorse took a step closer to the plastic. Captain, We need to know a few things. For one, do you remember when the order came into your head? Do you know who told you to nuke Titan? Was it the Swarm?"
He was shaking his head. No, it can't be the Swarm. I'd know. Wouldn't I know?
Does that mean it was a human voice? A human told you to do it?
I don't know. I have no memory of it. I was standing by my chair on the bridge, and the next thing I know, I'm here.
Whitehorse continued on. Okay, then let's go backward in time from there. Have there been any other moments where you blacked out? Periods of time you... Chapter 54. Sick Bay, ISS Independence, Gas Giant Calais, Britannia System. She stepped away from the door to Sick Bay and it slid shut. Get Mumford. Tell him to meet me in the science lab, and any technician or officer that Mumford thinks would be helpful in figuring out what this is and how to open it. She held the little black box up again. Looking at it, it was almost like the events of the previous few hours and the last few weeks were a dream. She had dreamed. She'd dreamed of her little sister, her 1-in-a-million brain cancer, her miraculous recovery, her horrific death at the hands of a reckless driver the same day she was given a clean bill of health. And how, just 2 weeks ago, Granger's voice spoke strange words from that event, the dying words of her sister, words that he could have never known. And now, she was holding a black box. "Does that have to do with Granger?" said Civic. "It does." She lowered her voice so any passers-by wouldn't hear something they shouldn't. "It sounds crazy, but it might be Granger himself. What's left of him, anyway." Civic whistled low. Whitehorse held her hand out. "May I?" Proctor handed it over, and Whitehorse examined it, studying its surface, its material, hefted its weight. "There are metal pads here. Maybe for electronic access? That's what I'm hoping. Let's go." Whitehorse summoned Mumford and one of his deputies, a woman named Achebe, and they all arrived at roughly the same time, except for Ensign Achebe, whose usual post was in the lab itself.
"Ma'am, good to see you again,"
said Mumford, leading her into the lab. "You too, Commander. Ensign," she added, nodding to Achebe.
"What have we got, Admiral?"
said Mumford, looking at the black box. "I found it in Titan," she began, handing the box to him. "When Granger's ship burrowed into it, he somehow managed to create a giant empty void inside the mantle, and at the center was the remains of his ship, which, for the most part, was the old ISS Victory, heavily modified. He spoke to me there, and that is what he told me to take with me."
"He said he's in there?"
asked Mumford incredulously. He walked over to a table full of instruments. She hesitated. "He didn't use those words. I assumed that's what he was telling me, but he did say he had no original organic parts left, were his exact words. In fact, he said he was the box. I don't know if he was just saying that to imply his essence was in the box. I can't be sure. That's why we're here. We need to access him, contact him." Mumford inserted the box into the chamber of one of the instruments.
"Well, let's see what's in there first."
Moments later, the monitor next to the instrument turned on and displayed a ghost of an image. A white box, false-color image, she assumed. The instrument was a full-spectrum imager, which was currently scanning the box with every wavelength from energetic X-ray, terahertz rays, UV, visible, infrared, microwave, even shortwave radio, just in case there were any receivers inside of it.
"Well, it's either completely absorbing every single wavelength or it's completely solid. Take your pick."
She tapped a few buttons on the side of the machine. "Commander, there was technology down there inside Titan that I'd never even dream of. I think we can be safe to assume door number 1. The spectrum analyzer can't even nail down an alloy, and the mass spec can't even tell what atoms this thing is made out of. I think it's safe to assume it can also absorb all wavelengths." He took the box out of the scanner and carried it over to the electronics bench. Achebe was preparing a few electronic leads that she would be able to affix to the metal pads almost hidden on the black surface.
"Let's see if we can't integrate into its electronics package."
Proctor, Civic, and Whitehorse waited silently for nearly 10 minutes as the other two worked on it, speaking in low voices.
"This could take a while, Admiral."
"We've got time. Not too much time, but this is definitely our #1 priority right now. Keep at it." An hour later, Mumford threw up his hands in front of his chest.
"I'm stumped, ma'am. We can't even figure out what protocol it's using. We can't even send in a passive signal to explore the physical electronic structure to give us a sense of what we're working with. This thing is sealed tight, and I can't think of any other way to get inside that we haven't already tried."
She had been sitting. Civic and Whitehorse had already left to attend to other duties. Achebe was still tinkering with one of the instruments that was pointed at the box, but Mumford came and sat next to Proctor, shaking his head.
"I don't get it. I've never seen anything like it. I can literally tell you nothing about that box except for the fact that it's a physical solid object, it's black, almost a perfect black body in the sense that there are no molecular or atomic absorption lines in the spectrum, and it's most likely got circuitry inside, but even there I can't be certain. This thing is literally a black box. And you think Granger is in there?"
"Deus ex machina," she said. "God in a box." Chapter 55. Bridge, ISS Resolute, near Earth. Admiral Oppenheimer pored over the reports, following the status of the mustering of the fleet. The entire fleet, every last ship. So many had died at Britannia, and in the weeks before at New Dublin, Malprime, Indira, Persepolis. The list went on. So many ships, so many crews, so many fine officers, all lost.
"Any change in the sensor readings, Lieutenant?"
He didn't even glance over at the tactical station. "No change, sir. The gravitational eddies are still localized out by Ceres in the belt. They're moving at the same speed as before."
"Are they past Ceres yet?"
Vesta was actually humanity's largest colony in the asteroid belt, but Ceres was symbolic as the largest asteroid, dwarf planet, actually, and in spite of its small population, the shipyards and supply depots orbiting above were critical to IDF's defense of the solar system. "No, sir. The eddies should pass it in about 5 minutes.
So, more waiting. Good. More time to prepare for the inevitable.
Earth was being invaded. Again. And this time, if they were interpreting the sensor readings correctly, by more than one swarm ship. Many more.
Send word to the Stennis, the Avery, the Oregon, the Angola, and the Louisiana.
They're too damaged to help, and there's not enough time for them to fix any weapon systems to have any effect. They are to debark their crews at Moonbase and prepare for Oppenheimer maneuvers." "Aye, aye, sir," said the ensign at the comm station. Oppenheimer maneuvers. He'd asked for a better name. Only self-aggrandizing assholes like Vols and Granger named maneuvers after themselves. But his XO had insisted. The other man now looked over at him from the XO station. "See, sir, it has a wonderful ring to it."
"Too many syllables, it's a mouthful. Difficult to say in the course of a battle. It should be something simple like Sigma maneuvers or something."
"It's too late, sir. Everyone knows what they mean now, and to change would take time and risk confusion. I can order it changed, though, if you like." Oppenheimer just shook his head.
No time. Just tell those captains to offload as much crew as humanly possible. I'm not a Tim Granger, throwing lives away so needlessly. Even in defense of Earth, we can't become monsters. Not when there are real monsters out there.
He'd held a piece of intelligence close to his chest for months now. Not even Quimby knew, not Sepulveda, and certainly not Proctor. Monsters were real, and they were coming. "Good, sir. I've got to say, it's a genius idea, and you deserve full credit for it, even if you don't want it. They'll never expect it. Every power plant on every ship anywhere has Q-field shielding on it to prevent people from doing exactly what we're trying to do.
Save the praise for me when we're alive in a few hours. Until then, we're all dead men."
The tactical officer shouted, "Sir, one of the gravitational eddies just stopped near Ceres." He snapped to face her.
"Did we receive a metaspace distress signal from them?"
"No, sir. This is based on visual sensors. The image is light delayed."
"How long?"
28 minutes.
"On screen?"
Everyone looked up towards the front wall of the bridge, which shifted from its diagrammatic tactical view of the inner solar system to a grainy visual of Ceres. Chapter 56. Matriarch's Command Center, Sciorra Generation Ship Benevolence, Gas Giant Calais, Britannia System. Proctor cradled the black box in her lap as Civic piloted the shuttle to the Benevolence. Krull had invited her, wanting to explain the significance of part of the ligature reappearing on its own, and Proctor wanted to see if there was some Sciorra technology that could possibly communicate with Tim inside the box. "Final approach, ma'am," said Civic. "Steady as she goes, Batship." She still hated saying batshit. Krull herself met them on their flight deck, one of many, but the one closest to the Independence and the Defiance, and, coincidentally, nearest the end of the ship where giant hole gaped, just the size of the old ISS Constitution and change. "Shelby Proctor, welcome. Please follow me to the command center. We can speak more freely there," said Krull. Proctor wondered what she meant by that, but then remembered their recent civil war and assumed that the matriarch still couldn't trust everyone who was still there and hadn't been exiled to the magnanimity. They walked in silence the entire way, Proctor right behind Krull, then Civic, and a Marine escort following at the rear. When the door to the command center closed behind them, Proctor noticed that there were already IDF Marines in the room. "Where did you soldiers come from?" Krull gestured towards them with a long-fingered hand. "They've been our guests since your Admiral Oppenheimer decided to commandeer the Benevolence to use on a suicide mission against the Swarm. When Oppenheimer left the grave of Britannia, he ordered them to stay here, but to stand down, and I agreed to not make any attempt to overpower them." "Damn you, Christian," said Proctor. "War drives everyone insane." "Indeed," said Krull. "I'm here, Krull. Now tell me what the significance is of the ligature reappearing in part." The command center was clear, for the most part, and only 2 other matriarchs attended to their duties of running the ship's systems, on the other side of the empty room. Empty chairs at computer consoles and abandoned personal belongings as the rest of the command crew seemed to have left in a hurry. And, on one wall, blood, a reminder of their recent battle only hours old. "To do that, I must tell you about how my people reproduce." The scientist in her perked her ears up. Sciorra reproduction had been a complete mystery for the 30 years they'd been studied. Proctor herself was the galaxy's foremost human expert in Sciorra biology, and even she didn't know. She knew almost every Sciorra she'd ever met was female, and that their bodies were full of thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of what they called internal children. They were highly developed organisms with just as much brain power as an average adult Sciorra, and little else besides some cilia for basic movement. How those interior children were born and how an interior child turned into an exterior child was a mystery to her. "Go on. I'm intrigued." "There are very few adult males among my people, and the ones that do are responsible for mating to as many females as possible, but only once each." A whistle from Civic interrupted her. "Wow. I think you just described every young human male's deepest fantasy." "Batshit, shut up," said Proctor. "Matriarch, please go on." "Once a female mates, thousands of her eggs are fertilized all at once and immediately begin development into an interior child. It is a physical process, of course, but there is an intimate mental aspect as well. A matriarch connects mentally to each one, individually, and it's a process. It happens one by one, not as group or in batches. It's personal, and it takes days for each one, which means to reproduce an entire family of interior children requires hundreds of years," said Proctor, doing the calculation. "Yes. The mental bond from mother to child is like the ligature, but is not dependent on it. It is like a primordial ligature, repeated thousands of times over. And as each bond is formed with each interior child, they begin forming the bonds with each other. Again, one by one. And what results is a web, a net, a whole fabric of consciousness that we share. We are not of one mind, we are not of one will, but we are intimately connected, and what one child thinks is heard by all, and the matriarch can hear them all at once, simultaneously, and understand them individually.
That's absolutely remarkable, said Proctor. The scientist in her was starting to get excited, in spite of the mortal danger of the situation. And if they don't agree, then your conversation with them and them with each other must be cacophonous. How do you cope?
It takes about 1,000 years for the average matriarch to finally master it. But along the way, she becomes intimately connected with each child, understanding them almost completely. Their hopes, their fears, their strengths, their weaknesses, and, by the end, the entire family of matriarch and interior children is a remarkable thing, capable of thinking thousands of things at once, solving hundreds of problems simultaneously, all communicated through this proto-ligature. And so it was for hundreds of thousands of years, until the swarm came. As you know, they used the liquid Valerisi as their physical vehicle to wield their influence in our universe, and when the Valerisi were introduced into our bodies, it had effects that even the swarm could not imagine. The ligature, it's what they used to control everything, and they stole it from you and bastardized it into their own despotic purposes, said Proctor. More or less. But what they did not expect was how we changed the Valerisi. They had a latent connection to metaspace already, but by being incorporated into the ligature, it expanded their horizons, so to speak. They essentially learned how to make their own. So when we were controlled by the swarm, it would have been senseless for us to destroy the ligature, because by then they could have restored it within days. And since the Valerisi outnumbered us by a factor of several trillion—
Excuse me? Proctor's jaw hung open slightly. Did you say they outnumbered you by a factor of several trillion? Trillion with a T. Your English is nearly perfect, but I just want to make sure we understand that to mean the same thing.
We mean the same thing, Shelby Proctor. The Valerisi were a vast host. When they died, it was like a massive symphony orchestra filling an entire performance hall that abruptly fell silent. When their ships were destroyed by your torpedoes.
Her heart fell. She knew she had committed genocide, but until that moment, she hadn't realized the unthinkable extent of it.
But the past is gone, and now something has happened. As I said, after so many words, a small piece of the ligature is back. It's a shadow of its former self. It's almost—
Chapter 57. Bridge, Interstellar 1. Gas giant Calais, Britannia system. President Sepulveda made sure he stood ramrod straight, attempting by force of will to make his head as tall as the large reptilian aliens next to him. And if he couldn't be as tall, his back would be straighter, damn it.
Purpose, Tombstone. Speak with purpose. Everyone is watching. History is watching.
You promised me great weapons to defeat the swarm, Sepulveda. I see nothing here at your shipyards but damaged ships and fear,
said Vishkanakarsa. He hissed as he spoke, and the president couldn't tell if it was indicative of emotion or just the Dulmasi's way of speaking. But his words alone indicated the emotion. It was clear the Dulmasi leader had a low opinion of humans.
A promise I'm about to keep, Vishkane. I would never even consider deceiving someone as powerful as yourself. While I'm confident that United Earth could pound your world into dust, and while we've refrained from that because of the simple fact that we don't need to, that does not mean we don't respect your strength. And at this moment, I don't dare test your strength.
He'd read the psych profiles on the Dulmasi, tried to understand them as best he could in the hour it took to T-jump to Verdredal,
the Domasi homeworld where he expected to either find Karsa or someone who knew where he was. They respected strength, they despised the weak, but they would also not be intimidated into any action. And when they'd met, just 30 short minutes after he'd arrived in orbit around their planet, the Domasi were nothing if not decisive and punctual. He brought his full politician's mindset to bear on the alien. He poked and prodded his subject until he figured out exactly what it wanted to hear. And then he said it, shamelessly. There was a reason he'd ascended to the presidency, after all, and it wasn't just because of an assassination. Karsa grumbled and hissed, and from his politician's sixth sense, he interpreted that as grudging approval. Like a voter's face saying, "I may not like you, but I'll vote for you anyway because you might give me something I want." And remember, great Vishgane Karsa, we have a common enemy. With your incontestable strength and our mighty fleets, the swarm doesn't stand a chance when we are united in fury and brotherhood. As fellow warriors, we will prevail, I assure you. Vishgane Karsa grumbled even more loudly, and his hiss carried a sense of excited expectation. Like a voter's face saying, "I may actually hate you, but I absolutely loathe your opponent even more." Good Lord. Intergalactic diplomacy was just like a party caucus in Iowa. "Sir, visual comm now open to the Benevolence," said the comms officer. It turned out Proctor wasn't even on the Independence or the Defiance, but the Benevolence itself. Efficient, he'd only have to have this conversation once. Krull and Proctor appeared on the screen. He saw a few IDF officers and Marines in the background and another Skjora matriarch. Krull spoke first. "President Sepulveda, you have had success already." "I have, Matriarch Krull. Admiral Proctor, it's good to see you again, especially given the circumstances." His implied meaning was clear. We may have had our differences, but the swarm just destroyed our home, so by God let's set that aside and go beat the shit out of them. She only replied with a nod, which meant, "Very well, but I haven't forgotten that you tried to kill me." "Vishgane Karsa, we are honored by your presence and your strength. I invite you and the President to come aboard the Benevolence so we can discuss plans." He hissed his approval.
"I will come, but I was promised weapons."
Krull raised her sparse eyebrows, and Sepulveda wondered if that was her trying to approximate a human expression, or if the Skjora did that too. Either way, she played along. "Of course, we will discuss that as well." Oh, God, she's a politician too. Perfect, non-committal answer that the recipient could interpret however they wanted. The screen returned to the image of Wellington shipyards and the gas giant Calais, and he turned to his Secret Service chief. "Tom, minimal escort, just you. No, I can see what you're going to say. It's dangerous, sure, but it's also my final word, so let's get moving." The flight over to the Benevolence was short and uneventful, and soon they were met on the flight deck by Krull, Proctor, a fighter pilot he didn't recognize, and a few IDF Marines. Krull gave Karsa a half-bow, followed by a fist to her chest, and then held a hand out to him. She was a perfect diplomat, using the appropriate greeting for each species. "If you'll follow us, Mr. President, Vishgane Karsa. To access the weapons, we need to enter a room."
"They're stored in a room. Weapons powerful enough to destroy the swarm are stored in a room," hissed Karsa.
"We shall see whether it's powerful enough to take out the swarm, but yes. Please, follow me." Krull led them through the door from the flight deck, down a long corridor and boarded a lift. All along the way, Sepulveda noticed blood smears on the walls, the floor, sometimes spattered up on the ceiling, even a dead body right near the lift that no one had cleared yet. When the lift started moving, Sepulveda asked, "Did you have trouble here, Matriarch? Were you invaded?" "We fought among ourselves." "The Skjora." He was dumbfounded. "I saw evidence that you were fighting another ship over what looked to be your home world." He noticed her cringe at the mention of the homeworld, which he noted. "But I never would have guessed you would fight hand-to-hand with such—" The lift door opened, revealing a hallway strewn with bodies. Savagery. The hallway extended on for what seemed like forever into the distance. It was the epicenter of the signs of violence. Blood still pooled wet in some places. Bodies were stacked 3 or 4 high in others. When one ceases to be governed by logic and reason and begins to fight for mere belief, that is when the savagery is the worst. Many succumbed to their rage, and I was not innocent either. He decided to end the questioning there as they advanced down the hallway, the rank smell of death all around. At the end, he saw... Chapter 58. Bridge, Sword of Justice, Gas Giant Calais, Britannia System. Danny Proctor, at the helm of a ship much smaller than his beloved Magdalena Issachar, but far faster and with mag-rail guns, guided them into orbit around Calais, just a few dozen kilometers from Wellington Station. Lou was at the tactical station searching through the ship registries and transponders. "Found it. The Defiance. It's unstealthed, and, wouldn't you know it, it's right next to the Independence. And you won't believe this, Interstellar 1. The President of United Earth is here, and all 3 ships are..." Chapter 59. The Forbidden Hallway, Skura Generation Ship Benevolence, Gas Giant Calais, Britannia System. Krull had no sooner said, "They're almost here," than the lift doors opened behind them back down the hallway. "Oh, my God," said Proctor. She almost dropped the box. "Danny!" Her eyes were wet, a hand covered her mouth, and then she started running. The two embraced. "Hi, Aunt Shelby." He pulled back for a moment and eyed the hallway. "Nice new digs you've got here." "Oh, Danny!" She pulled him in again, her face buried in his chest as he was almost a full foot taller. "Do you know about Britannia?" He only nodded. "I'm so sorry, Danny." The two cried. She'd both dreamed of this moment and, ever since Britannia, dreaded it. But now that she was finally holding him, the tears were released, and she didn't even try holding them back. But only for half a minute. There was a civilization to save, after all. 4 of them. 4, not 3. She sobbed once more as she realized it. She could save 4 civilizations. The Valerisi were not dead. She composed herself. Admirals do not cry, especially not in battle, even when your brother dies, even when 8 billion of your brothers die. "Delivered as promised, ma'am," said Lou finally, catching up to Danny halfway down the hall. "You?" Proctor eyed her. Her facial burns were fading. Of course, the reason why she was able to withstand so much physical punishment. The explosion on Bolivar, the deadly radiation in the Defiance engineering room. She remembered how Tim Granger, when he was taken captive by the swarm-controlled Russians, was injected with swarm matter and it saved his life, cured his cancer, essentially brought him back to life. "You were carrying a Valerisi in you the whole time. It all makes sense now." Lou shook her head. "No, ma'am, I wasn't. Well, I am now, but that's only in the last few hours." She turned to Danny. "He infected me, willingly, with my permission, and, ma'am, it's remarkable. They're a race so advanced, so enlightened, so beautiful." She looked down and chuckled. "Look at me, calling something beautiful. Never thought I'd see the day." Proctor, still holding Danny at arm's length, looked back at him, searching his face, trying to find signs of an alien intelligence. "Danny, is it true?" "I've felt him, it, inside me now for 2 weeks. Small, at first, hardly anything there at all. But within a few hours it was a real presence, and I could hear its voice, feel what it felt. I had thoughts that weren't..." Chapter 60. The Forbidden Room, Skura Generation Ship Benevolence, Gas Giant Calais, Britannia System. The room was surprisingly empty, but that was before Proctor noticed the black curtain drawn in front of them. From the airflow and acoustics, the room felt much larger than the empty 5-by-4-meter space in front of them. Not quite empty. A set of Skura clothing, crusted with old brown blood, lay neatly folded next to the wall by the door. Proctor shook her arm. "Krull,
Are those your sisters?"
Palrum Krull, still held tightly by Karsa, hesitantly opened her eyes and looked down.
"Yes."
She immediately closed her eyes again.
"Then I'm sorry," said Proctor.
A bloody set of clothing was not an encouraging sign that they'd find the sister alive. But how the hell had the clothes been folded?
"Matriarch, are you 100% certain that no one else has been in here besides your sister?"
Krull shook her head.
"No one. The hallway had a guard set on it after her disappearance, and the ship's locator tracked her here. Then you either have a very stealthy maid, or someone lives in this room."
Proctor walked forward and parted the curtain, and gasped.
"Is that a robot?"
A humanoid-looking contraption stood in the center of the room, facing them. Its head was clearly plastic or ceramic, with some vaguely human features, and other distinctly Skjora features, such as the faint blue tinge, and others bore striking resemblance to Karsa, such as the scaling down the neck and the somewhat flat vertical pupils. But it was unmistakably artificial. It looked to have flesh-like hands, but the rest of its arms were exposed metal, servos, actuators, and wires. Same with the legs. It was not clothed, and its torso was a mix of androgynous features and more obvious machinery, such as an abdomen that was similarly composed of various electronics. It was holding a sword. And its voice was vaguely mechanical too, a synthetic noise, too perfect, too uncanny. But it had placed the sword on a shelf hanging off the wall.
"Welcome, friends. I apologize for the fate of your friend that entered earlier, but now that the appropriate number and type of beings have entered, I can stand down. I've been waiting for you a long, long, long time." "How long?"
Proctor studied the robot's other, less noticeable features. It had lips, but they seemed to be shiny plastic rather than anything resembling flesh. It was bald, just a smooth, shiny plastic head. But its eyebrows moved when it talked, though they seemed to be painted on rather than being composed of actual hair.
"More than 1,000,000 years, it said. Fortunately, I was not programmed to be impatient."
Krull's eyes were still closed, but she managed to speak.
"Who are you? What are you doing aboard my ship? How did you get here? Who let you in?" "I'm the caretaker of this place. I'm here because it's my place. I was here from the very beginning. I may well have been built in this room for all I know, and as for who let me in—"
It cocked its head in a decidedly human fashion.
"I'm not allowed to say. Similar to Palrum Krull's biological mandate to not think about this place, that was also programmed, if you will." "But why did so many of my sisters lose their respect for the unthinkable thought?" said Krull.
"Because it was time," it replied, as if that explained everything.
"Time for what?"
"Time for the end." The words sent a chill up Proctor's spine. Karsa growled low in his throat.
"But maybe I can help you, Palrum Krull. Will you allow me to touch your cranium?"
Eyes still closed, she seemed to consider this. Finally, she nodded.
"I consent."
The robot stepped forward with perfect grace, like the entertainment robots on Britannia or Earth or New Dublin that populated the taverns and brothels. It reached a hand out to Krull's head, its servos and actuators whirring and clicking. When contact was made, it only took a few seconds before Krull opened her eyes.
"It is not permanent, nor complete. I can't remove such a deeply ingrained biological and psychological response. But I've magnetically stimulated an appropriate area of your amygdala that will permit you to disregard it, with some effort." "Thank you. Vishkane, please set me down."
Karsa lowered her to the ground. Proctor studied the rest of the room. Large chambers lined the walls, each with indicators, tubes, wiring, and controls. The walls were full of monitors and screens showing technical diagrams and, occasionally, what looked like maps of solar systems, clusters of stars, whole quadrants of the galaxy, and even one that looked like it might be the local group of galaxies. Certain colors shaded various areas of space, demarcating different areas of space that Proctor did not see the logic of.
"You said it was time for the end. What do you mean?" Admiral Shelby Proctor, there will be all the time in the world to explain everything later. I will place myself at your disposal for years, if need be, to answer all your questions. But now is the time for action. The swarm is upon us. Earth only has a few hours, Vedra Dole less than a day. San Martin may fall today as well, along with New Dublin, Bolivar, and Mau Prime. Tomorrow, based on the swarm's patterns, it will likely be the Irigoyen sector and all the planets there. Within the week, we'll all be terminated, except for a scattered few ships and stations too small to attract notice. But the swarm will be thorough. Their hatred for humanity is especially hot, and for the Sciura, and the Dolmasi, and the Valerisi. Why? Because you are the only races that have ever beaten it. You beat it together, and for that the swarm swore vengeance. They don't often actually enter corporeally into other universes, but for you, that honor was extended. Proctor chuckled in spite of the dire situation. So, you were programmed with irony, too. She held the box up, knowing that the caretaker most likely knew what to do with it. Can you help me with this? That's why you are here, after all, is it not? You didn't figure that part out. She smiled politely. I'm afraid not. 4 representatives, 1 from each race, was required for entry to this room. The programmer knew that when that